Brandi Kruse, formerly of the Fox local news channel in Seattle, now the host of Undivided. Her independent show is back. Brandi, thank you for doing this. I saw this headline. Actually, a friend sent it to me from the Seattle Times. Racial disparities prompt calls to repeal King County's bicycle helmet law. And I'm going to go now to your hot take here on Patreon. So everyone should go check out patreon.com/undivided so you can follow Brandi, especially if you're a Washingtonian, and especially if you live in Seattle, because you'll get something that a lot of people are not going to give you in the mainstream news there. Okay, so Brandi, you hit play. So here we are. We can see double Brandi, which you should have to pay extra for, but a lot of you are getting this for free, so you should just be extra grateful. What was your take on this, Brandi?
Well, look, I don't really care if there is a helmet law, to be honest. I mean, if people want to, people know that helmets would keep them safe if they're riding a bike. And so if the government, you don't need the government to tell you that. And so I don't really care that they repeal the helmet law. What I don't like is the fact that they think that they're fighting racism by repealing the helmet law. And they just have taken a very simplistic view of what the data tells them about who's being cited for not wearing a helmet. And then, of course, they chalk it up to racism because that's what everything is chalked up to these days. And so I just find it silly that they think they're taking this huge step to fight racism when in reality, it's doing nothing of the sort. So that's my take.
Okay, so and like maybe somebody can convince me otherwise. I'm not saying I'm necessarily hard and fast on this, but I'm not really a huge fan of helmet laws in general. I feel like you should be able to take personal risk if you want to on your bicycle. If I understand correctly, when it comes to the Seattle Times article, which I'm showing now, first they start off with a story about racism, and then they say that essentially, like, if you're a person of color, you're more likely to live in poverty and can't afford a helmet. And so then you get pulled over more. So it's just targets people of color. And so if you take it away, you'll have less infractions, I guess. And I guess that's the argument they're making here.
Yeah.
And then they have this chart, racial disparities in bicycle helmet infractions, and like break it down by race, which is interesting. But I guess, can you explain this to me? I mean, maybe I'm missing something here, but bicycle helmet infractions, and like 73% are white. Am I seeing that right?
Yeah, that looks like the Seattle Times thing. I think what this all stemmed from in the controversy around this, there was an article that Crosscut did. Crosscut is like a Seattle-centric, almost like NPR, but print. Think of it that way. Crosscut did an analysis of citations since 2017. And so, and this one looks like it includes since 2003. And so I think there's sort of been this argument that maybe since 2017, they've become a little bit more disproportionate. So since 2017, if you were a Black bicyclist, you were 4 times more likely than a white bicyclist to get a citation for not wearing a helmet. You were 2 times more likely if you were a Native American bicyclist. And then like more than half of the citations were going to homeless people. So Crosscut did this article. And then in response to that, there were 2 publicly commissioned studies that looked at this issue, because Crosscuts was mostly about homeless people. So there were 2 studies that looked at this on the basis of race and found the disparities that I just detailed with Black bicyclists and Native American bicyclists. But what's interesting about these 2 studies, neither of them looked at whether there was a reason why Black bicyclists and Native American bicyclists were disproportionately getting these citations. It didn't look like at any cause. It just chalked it up to racism. And when you look at, homeless people accounting for half of all citations, that makes sense, right? And if we're being honest, I'm going to be blunt, homeless people are responsible for the vast majority of bicycle thefts. So not exactly surprising that you might have homeless individuals riding around the city on a bike that isn't theirs and they don't have a helmet for it, right? And so I think that, in the effort to call it racist, to enforce this law on the books, they're really missing out on an opportunity to deal with what is the root cause of why some of these people don't have a bicycle helmet.
Whether you live in Seattle or somewhere else, I am sure there is at least one law or a lack of law that makes you want to drink, which is why you should go to AllisonWinePromo.com. That's Allison with 1L winepromo.com. You get 50% off of my favorite Malbecs from Argentina. As I've said many times before, these are new bottles. If you got a pairing several months ago, one from the oldest vineyard in Argentina, another from 8,950 feet, so an extreme altitude Malbec, that means less pesticides. These wines use no flavoring, no filtering, no dyes, and no excess chemicals, and they are very good if you like a robust red wine. But maybe you need a hot cup of coffee or a cold brew tea, which is how I do my coffee fruit tea called Katura Tea from twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. That's twinenginecoffee.com/Allison. These are high altitude Nicaraguan roasts. They've got a wide variety of them. They are also USDA certified organic. So wherever you are, whatever laws you love or whatever laws you hate, throw back a glass of twinenginecoffee.com/Allison or AllisonWinePromo.com. Support my channel and support free speech wherever you are. The other opposite side's arguing like, okay, you have 4.7% of the Seattle cyclist demographics with a star, which I don't know what that means. Demographics are based on bike rider responses to a questionnaire sent out by the Seattle Department of Transportation. Okay. So you have 4.7% are Black, but they make up 17.3% of the helmet infractions, or like Native American, Alaskan, Native, Asian, Pacific Islander, okay, so there's 17. Okay, so this is confusing. So Asian Pacific Islander is 17.8% of the Seattle cyclist demographic, but they make up only 1.6% of the bicycle helmet infraction. So what's happening there? It's
They, in the racism argument, they always leave out Asian people. So I don't know why.
It's weird too, because even the Seattle Times, it starts to kind of make that argument in this article. I know I saw it. As you're talking, I'm going to look for it. But they even brought that up. But it looks like the data doesn't even support that. So I don't know. That's kind of odd.
Right. And this doesn't include homeless individuals. And that was a big part of the issue. And obviously you can see the disparity with Black bicyclists, although I'm a little confused because on the left, it has 2003 to 2020, and then the demographics are from 2019. So you're looking at a 17-year time period and comparing that to a single point in time. So I'm not sure. Let's ignore this graphic because I don't really know what's going on in that Seattle Times graphic. But so my whole argument about this was, the King County basically says that they're going to spend $200,000 on increased awareness for the safety of bicycle helmets, which everybody knows that bicycle helmets keep you safe. And then they're going to spend $200,000 on providing helmets to people who don't have them, which is fine. And again, maybe it's like my libertarian bend. I've got like a little sprinkle of it where I don't really care if you have a bike helmet law on the books. Just don't pretend that you're fighting racism. Something that King County Councilman Gurmai Zahalai said in this meeting of the King County Board of Health when it happened, and he told this to the New York Times, he said, we need to take this holistic approach. Are you still there?
I'm here.
Oh, okay, great. We need to take this.
Making you big. I always tell people ahead of time, and I didn't tell you this time, that when I make you big, I'm still here. I just want everyone to see.
Oh, okay. I saw the screen go black.
That's
just
okay.
An old lady.
But I'm keeping this in the video.
Tech is confusing to me. Gurmai Zahalai, who's a King County councilman, who's also on this Board of Health sort of working group that made this decision. He had this fascinating quote in the New York Times where he said, we need to take this holistic look to public health. And they consider racism to be a public health crisis in King County. They've dubbed it one. And he basically said we need to hold traumatic brain injuries on the same plane as the trauma that one would face from getting a $30 citation. And that quote to me, you're telling me that you would rather someone get a traumatic, irreversible brain injury, and you think that would be just as bad as if they got a $30 citation from a police officer for not wearing a bicycle helmet. And that's absurd to me. And so when you look at, the county's plan moving forward, again, I don't care if you do away with the bicycle law, just don't say you're fighting racism. To me, a better solution would be if you really believe, and the county is saying, we believe that bicycle helmets save lives. We just don't want there to be, we don't want it to be enforced by police officers. To me, a better solution would be You have officers who contact people who don't have a helmet on. You have a voucher that's either county funded, preferably funded by a nonprofit, and the officer can give them a ticket, but give them a voucher that can only get them a helmet. And then they show up to Seattle Muni Court. They've got their helmet in their freaking hand. They've got their ticket, and then their ticket can go away. And now that person has a helmet, and they don't have a ticket that they have to pay. To me, that would be a best case scenario. But of course, in the name of racial equity, the county just did away with the law altogether, which I know that they're putting money aside to give people helmets, but I don't think that you're going to have a lot of encounters with the homeless population that is actively seeking out a helmet unless there's some sort of intervention. So,
was this something that you had heard building into this meeting, or did this kind of come out of nowhere?
I remember the Crosscut article in 2020 and the bicycle community in Seattle making a big deal out of it. And that sort of getting the ball rolling. And then I don't remember hearing a lot until this Board of Health meeting happened and Seattle was in national headlines again for deeming its bike helmet law racist. And by the way, Seattle's not the only major city to do that for that reason. Tacoma, which for people who aren't familiar is south of Seattle, I think it's the second or third biggest city in the state. They got rid of their bike helmet law for a similar reason, because they thought it was being disproportionately used to target the homeless and communities of color. So it's just a very fascinating debate.
What I thought is interesting about a place like Seattle is that they have, I think there are a lot of dumb rules. And it feels like the only way you can argue anymore that they're dumb is by calling them racist. It's like it just feels like the only argument that works anymore, for whatever reason. And, even if people like firmly believe that, and honestly, like talking to some of the folks back when I was an environmental reporter who were against some of the taxes, like, or other regulations for vehicles, whatnot, would say that it's like a tax on the middle or lower class. And that was their argument, not a racist based argument, but one that, and maybe the others would say, well, that ties into racism with poverty. But I mean, I heard that a lot, but it was like, if you talked class, like if you use that argument, it's a tax on the middle class or the lower class, that I felt like fell flat quite a bit in Western Washington. But if you use the racist argument, you might get somewhere with it. I don't know.
Yeah.
Have you found like it just seems like that a lot of times just ignoring like the class side of the problems that the city is facing, or and how those laws impact it?
Yeah, and that's, I would say, a progressive issue on the whole, is there's a refusal to look at class analysis at all, and to consider people who are poor, regardless of the color of their skin, marginalized. You can have a white person who is poor, who is marginalized, but there's just an inability to identify with that and to do any sort of class analysis. It all has to be analysis on the basis of identity. And, I would agree with you that there have been some laws that I don't really like this one. And weed, for instance, weed was legalized. And one of the arguments during that whole debate was disproportionate impacts for, people of color and the homeless being cited for smoking pot. And like, I think pot should have been legalized. So I agree with that. And that doesn't seem like a very consequential decision. Neither does the bike helmet one. But for instance, if people are familiar with Seattle politics or the state of downtown Seattle, it is a disaster. There's open air drug use everywhere. Multiple times I've been downtown and had like crack smoke blown in my face. And one of the reasons why the city has basically decriminalized low-level narcotics of all kinds is there were arguments about disproportionate impacts on the homeless and on people of color. And to me, that's an incredibly consequential thing to just stop prosecuting because of a race argument, because it's had really profound impacts on downtown Seattle, which is the economic engine for the entire state.
As always, this video has been clipped short for YouTube. So if you want to check out everything Brandi Kruse and I talked about related to Seattle and beyond, go to my other platforms. The links are in the description. The best place you can go, though, is AllisonMorrow.locals.com, where you get exclusive content. You can pose questions ahead of time for interviews. And you can also give me feedback from videos from the week before or the week ahead. Join my editorial board. We have editorial board meetings on Saturdays. But whatever you do, don't stay on YouTube. If you want to see the full truth about what's going on around us, you got to go somewhere else.